Hello and welcome to BoardGameCast. This is episode 12 and my name is Jesper Edmark, also known as Mordachai on BoardGameGeek. I am the host of this show, in which I give you full sessions of board games. As you see, this episode will be Puerto Rico, and I have already done an episode on Puerto Rico, so I won't go over the rules here. I hope that you know them already. If you don't, you can always check the first episode. That will give you some insight to the rules. What is different about this session is two things. First of all, it is played on the 10-year anniversary edition instead of the regular edition. And also this is the finals of Gothcon XXXVI, a convention in Sweden that is held each Easter. And the final players here was Per, Claes, Måns and Christopher. And that is the positions they have around the table, and Per will be sitting to the left here, and then clockwise around the table will be Claes, Måns and Christopher. So Per and Claes will be starting with Indigo, and Måns and Christopher will start with Corn here. This will be played with the two alternative rules, just as in my first episode. So we have switched position between the factory and the university. So the university, that in the basic rules cost 8, here costs 7, and the factory likewise cost 8 instead of 7. And the other change is that the Corn players start with 1 doubloon less than normal. And if you want the full discussion as to why, you can check my first video. Also, BoardGameGeek has a lot of information on these balancing changes. The players had the chance to vote if they wanted to play with these changes or not, and decided that they wanted to do that. This was before we drew lots about who was sitting in what position. Before the actual gameplay, I would like to talk a little about the 10-year anniversary edition. I personally like the look of this edition. The metal coins are a nice touch. The cardboard is really thick and nice to touch. The layout of the board is a bit annoying. They have changed the layout, and it doesn't provide any benefit in regards to the old layout, but that is preference, I guess. Neither of the players around the table nor the spectators around the table here really understood why they decided to make that change. Per actually ended up switching his board around so he could look at it as it used to be, simply because this was late at night, the third night of the convention, and we were all pretty tired. The players here at some points will do a few actions that I won't be able to explain, and that is due to it being late at night. The goods markers and the colonist markers are very well produced and fit the game. The ship markers are very nice. The buildings have pictures, and that is a nice touch. One thing that is not so good though is the circles on the buildings itself. Even at the table, it's hard to make out the amount of circles on each building. If you know the buildings in the game, that's not a problem, but no one around the table could understand why they had to have bad contrast on the buildings. The circles on the buildings, the colonist spaces. Ironically enough, this is only happening on the base set of buildings. All the expansion buildings have very clear circles in red or purple, but they could have had circles in blue, for instance, and that would have made them stand out much better. But I don't know if this actually worth the extra money that you pay for the 10-year anniversary edition, but I'm pretty happy with my purchase, and you have to make up your own decision if it's worth it for you or not. This will be much of a play-by-play session report that has been asked for from some of the commentators to my videos, and I will try to do that here. It's also because I have already given you a Puerto Rico episode, so if you want something more about the game, you can always watch episode 1 instead. So round 1, and Per here starts with the settler. And I agree with that choice. It's the best choice for play 1 most of the times, and he immediately goes into one of the 8 quarries. And that is, as I've said before, the strongest move in my point. I think so, at least. Also, there were no corn out among the first 5 plantations, so he didn't give the second player any advantage there. So what you see here is Per switching the board around, turning it around to the regular way, so he can stop being confused. And what is taken then by class is the builder, and that is followed by a major here from Mons, and that is a quite standard opening for the game. And as last player, Christopher here decides to craft to be able to get shipping or selling immediately at the start of the game. Now, Mons is pretty happy about this because he will be able to trade and get use of his small market that he got in the first round here. But at the same time, Christopher gets that first lead in shipping, and he also gets the doubloon that is put on the captain. So that is a quite good move, early move. I personally like to wait with shipping until I have an economy going, but shipping is very strong if you have a consistency in it. So I cannot really disagree with Christophe's move here. And the last thing that happens here is a builder again, and the production buildings are getting into play really fast. That is also a good move on Per's behalf, simply because he got that building for free. So that is something to consider. Free actions is good actions. So the third round, and we immediately see more settling here. The settler is quite important early in most games, simply because it gives you the chance to get extra quarries, or get quarries in this case. Klaus set his strategy already in round 1. He started out with a construction hut, and that is indicative of a building strategy most of the time. And that strategy is basically getting a few quarries out into play as fast as possible and use the discounts they provide to get cheap buildings into play. And hopefully you can use those buildings to get both the economy going, since you will lack a lot of goods, and then end the game as soon as possible, so you are the one that has the big buildings in play and has left the other players behind in that regard. So that is what he started out here. He still got coffee early here, and that let him have that resource that good that he would be able to sell for a lot of money once he managed to get the coffee roaster out into play. We have come to round 4, and again there is shipping here. Christopher leads out with shipping once again, and that is his strategy for this game, and that is apparent at this point. He has gone for indigo and corn, cheap value goods that is easily shipped early and late, and he has already shipped twice this game for good effect. He has taken the captain both of those times. So we then go around the table. We have another mayor here, and we then have another builder. The building strategy of Klaus is immediately coming to play. With a rebate and the money has collected so far, he managed to get a coffee roaster out really fast in this game. And getting early coffee out and not be forced to ship it, that is the key to a really good building strat. There are a lot of passing going on here, and then Per gets to build his next production building. We had a small take back here due to people being really tired, basically, and all the players decided to build buildings that production buildings. And then we had come full circle, and round 5 began. Immediately we had production. Now there is a possibility to be producing, and then the mayor comes out again, and for the first time in the game the colony boat is an uneven number situation. So the next player who gets the mayor gets 3 colonists, while the other gets 1 each. So we continue around, and more settling occurs here. And there were early game a lot of settling, building, and surprisingly enough shipping in this session. Usually the captain has a few doubloons on it early before the first shipping occurs, but here it was one of the roles that did not accumulate a lot of doubloons during the mayor change phase. So Klaus is the one that picks up the bonus colonist here. Have said that he really would have liked to see that go around to him, but he also knew that the possibility for that was very, very small. And what happens then is that the colony ship is filled with a lot of colonists. And this is due to there being a lot of production buildings in play. And that is something that you should know, is that if there's a lot of production buildings, there will also be a lot of colonists coming to play. If the players are going for the other buildings, the beige buildings in this 10-year anniversary edition, or the purple buildings in the old edition, then there will be a lower influx of colonists to the island. And no, I cannot explain what this is. So we go around, and we have another production, and we have a trade. Now, when Pat is trading here, he is giving Klaus the opportunity to sell his coffee, and he could have blocked that by not trading and giving Mons the opportunity to sell his tobacco instead. The effect would have been the same for him, except that he would have lost the doubloons on the trader as well as the extra doubloon for the trader, but Mons would have gotten to sell instead of Klaus, but it was too much of a loss for Per to be able to give Mons that opportunity and take a lower amount of money himself. Mons still gets to trade, so he's not that unhappy for this. And what happens here is that the trading house is not filled up, and that actually is very good for Klaus, because he is one of the two persons around the table that has the opportunity to produce a good that can be sold. That's sugar or coffee. So that is really important for Klaus. Now this is something that would normally not be seen. Mons decides to go with university instead of a factory, and he said it plainly to everyone to hear that he would not have done that if it would have been the other way around, that factory would have been 7 and university would have been 8. But he decided here to go with another strat than Klaus. He sees that Klaus that's sitting before him is going a building strat, and usually you want to be the one in control, in the driver's seat, and if you have the same strat as your right-hand opponent, you usually are in a better position. I say usually because that is only true for the more balanced strats and the building strat, but if shipping, you want to be in the other seat. You want to have the opponent with the same strat to your left, because shipping strats most often is the one that both produces and ships. And if you are sitting behind the other person with the shipping strat, you can wait for your co-conspirator in strategy to do the moves that enable you to get the strategy going. So you gain more than your co-strategist in that case. So it all depends on what strat you are utilizing here. Most of the times you want to look at what the other players are doing and adapt, so that you are not forced into a position where you help another player as much as or equally as much as yourself. Christopher here, he is a crafter and a shipper. That is basically what he has staked, that's the role he has staked for himself this game. And by adapting that strategy, Per can utilize Christopher's actions in a very good way and be able to get as much and sometimes more effect of Christopher's actions than he gets himself. So Per is sitting in a very good position in shipping wise here. Now Christopher still has an edge in shipping. He got an earlier start and he produces very easily shipped goods. But the difference between Christopher and Per here is you just have to look at the buildings. Per already has 6 buildings into play. He has a diversity in production. He has a good setup, whilst Christopher only has 3 buildings and has fallen behind heavily on buildings, and he has no way to gain income, and that is really hurting him here. In the meantime, both 2 of the builders here goes for high money and high building. So that is their strat. Now, Mons has diversified his strat from a pure building strat to a bit of a mix. He decided to go the university instead of the factory, so his income is a little bit lower, but is still looking very good regarding the buildings. And since he went the hospice after the university, he has a really good influx of colonists. All his actions generate a colonist for him. He is not dependent on the mayor at all to gain all the workers he needs for his buildings. So every time someone takes the mayor, he gains extra colonists for those buildings that can be utilized by more than one colonist. And that also forces the other players to take the mayor more often, since one of the players is just ignoring the mayor role. He started with this strategy a little bit late, I feel, but it's a risky maneuver at the best of times. If he can get some shipping going and build at least 2 big buildings, he will be in a very good position to win the game, but that is dependent on several factors here. The shippers, in this case Christopher and Per, is shipping for all that they are worth here, and they are threatening to run away with the game if not stopped. They have no interest in helping the 2 builders to gain money and to build. They are happily going with roles that give them the least benefit, and as it happens, those roles are the roles that give them the best benefit, since the producer and the shipper, the captain, are the roles that they really need. The trader, when that is possible. So they are having good effect from the roles that the builders use here, and they don't give as much effect back when they pick their roles for their strategy. So that is something that is really good for both Christopher and Per. Now, on the other hand, the shipping strategy is not the end-all strategy. It's not the best strategy in the game, simply because it's in itself a quite risky move. If the builders manage to block 1 or 2 ships with the type of production that the shippers do not have, then they will be in a difficult position, because they will not be able to ship the goods that they produce. They produce a lot of goods, they can ship a lot of goods, but if one of the ships have coffee on it and the other have tobacco, in this case, then they would compete for one ship until the other ships has been filled up. Neither of Per or Christopher does have coffee and tobacco, but in this session the builders did not recognize the option of blocking the boats as soon as they could. Basically, that is because that will hinder themselves. They will not be able to sell as often, and they will get less money, and thus their own strategy will suffer for it. But at the same time, they would block a lot of point gains for the shippers. Both Christopher and Per here has harbors, so each type of good they ship yields an extra bonus point. And that amounts to a lot of points over the course of the game. And that has to be shut down for the builder strat to be able to win over a pure shipping strat. Now, at the same time, by shutting down the shipper strat, you are delaying your own strategy because you will gain less money, less income for your buildings. So it's again a risk taking, but you have to evaluate the different effects from your actions here. Will we be able to finish the game so fast that the shippers do not gain the full effect of their shipping, or do we have to take action to stop the shipments as much as possible? One thing that separates the two shippers here, Christopher and Per, is not only that Per has a lot of more points in buildings, while Christopher has a lot more points in shipping, but also because Per decided to go with a small warehouse, and that allows him to save barrels that otherwise would be burnt after shipping. Barrels rot away, and you can only keep one barrel unless you have a warehouse, and with a warehouse the shipping strategy is much more viable. Now that Per is sitting in a situation where he also has enough money to be able to build a big building, and in this case he is aiming for the customs house. That is really good for him, and this is one of the big decisions in the game. Claes, he goes for either the customs house or the city hall. The customs house would yield him some points, but it would also make sure that Per is not gaining as many points as he could have from shipping. Remember that the customs house make each barrel shipped worth 1.25 points. So it's if you have shipped a lot, you can gain a huge amount of bonus points. But at the same time, and the reason for Claes not to pick the customs house is not only that he will cripple himself, his own strategy, by going that inferior prestige building, but also because of the city hall actually giving Per almost as much points as the customs house, at least at this point. Per has already 5 beige buildings, so it would be a bit smaller swing perhaps for Per, but at the same time it would be at a huge cost for himself, for Claes, because he has not shipped for a lot of points in this session. He has gone for the building strat, and that means that he does not have a lot of points in shipping. And as you can see here, Per is able to put out very cheaply another beige building, and as long as he does that, he would not lose out if Claes had taken the customs house instead of the city hall. So in my opinion, Claes did the right choice here in taking the city hall and leaving the customs house. That is not the reason Per is in such good shape here, that he got the customs house, although it certainly helped. The reason Per is in a very good shape here is simply because he has shipped for a lot of points as well as built a lot of buildings, and that is usually a good way to win the game. Mons predictably went for the fortress as his first prestige building, and that is definitely what he wants to do. And as usual, especially in a game like this where there has been very few settles. There was a rush at the beginning of the game, but then the settler was the least taken role in this game. The residence becomes the prestige building that yields the least amount of points. The minimum amount of bonus points from the residence is 4, so you in this situation gain at least 8 points if it's manned, but it's still something that gives less points than the other prestige buildings. Now, Klaus could have made the game end here. If Klaus had picked any other building, any other role than the builder, Mons would have been able to build that residence and ended the game he had built out. But that would have cost Klaus quite a few points. He has the Guildhall, in my opinion, the most potent of the prestige buildings, and he would not have been able to afford that extra large sugar mill, so he would have lost points if he had not chosen the builder himself. So I think he made the right choice here, although I guess it is debatable. What ended up happening was that Mons, of course, passed. He calculated that he could not build 2 other buildings that would make the same amount of points as the residence itself, although that prolonged the game 1 turn. But all players know that the next turn will be the last turn here. So what happens here is a scramble for the last points. The shippers go for shipping, of course, and here you can see the effect of one of the boats being blocked by tobacco in this case. Per has a lot of indigo, and so does several of the other players here. And if they would have been able to ship immediately here, that could have changed quite a lot. Granted, since Per has gone for that small warehouse, he will still be able to ship a lot of indigo next turn. But what could have happened is there could easily have been a situation where Klaus would have been able to put out coffee or block a boat for another way, and then one of the other players, the tobacco boat was already blocked here, and then one of the other players could have blocked the last boat with, say, corn, and that would have cost Klaus 5 points here, so that's quite a lot. Last turn, and player 3 is the last mayor of the game, or governor, I should say, and that is one of the reasons that the 3rd player is usually in a very good position in this game, and had such a high winning percentage before the balancing changes were made, because the game is usually 14, 15, 16 rounds long, and player 3 usually gets to be governor the last turn here. So with this last turn, he builds out. Klaus is also able to build out and gain a few bonus points. Christopher has the least amount of buildings I have ever seen anyone build in Puerto Rico, and still be quite high in the points. Per is only 2 spots away from building out, and he has shipped for a huge amount of points. It's looking very good here at the end. The last action here is just trying to get as much tiebreaker value as possible, and class action here is the same, just trying to get a good tiebreaker value. And it was a discussion about how to get the best tiebreaker value, but it ended up with Claes realizing that he could not gain the best tiebreaker value, so instead he settled for second place in the tiebreaker value. Now it ended up not being an issue here because as you see, Per has a lot of points in all aspects of the game. He has shipped for over 30 points. He has a prestige building that yields him a decent bonus, and he has a high building total. It's not extreme in any way. The 25 points that Claes has is very high building value total, but its 16 points is still very respectable. And as you see, that is the real difference between Per and Christopher. Christopher only has 6 building points, and that is very low, very low. The two builders end up losing here. Per has had a very balanced strategy with a lot of shipping, and that really gave him the game. His main thought about this game was that he won simply because he sat after the other shipper. If he had been sitting in front or to the right of Christopher, he just plainly said that then Christopher would have won the game, and I agree with that. Had one less turn made any huge difference? Well, probably Måns and Claes would have ended up in second and third place here, and Måns would have won over Claes. Instead, the shippers gained an extra shipment, and the real reason that Per got so much out of that was because of that small warehouse. But this is a very good example of how positions around the table and the strategies that each player decide to go with really decides the game. And it's a good example of how this game changes with the different strategies around the table. I don't know. I think that Christopher should have tried to break the cycle of being the one that produced and have Per ship as much as he did. Maybe he could have gone with a small warehouse, and that would have been enough for him to save enough goods to be able to utilize his producing as much as he did. He just never got economy to build buildings, and that really cost him the game, I think. Christopher was in a very good position early, but since he just did not get the economy, he could not go through and keep up with Per's rush at the end. If the game had ended a couple turns earlier, that would have switched up the positions quite a lot, I feel. But the builders did not get the real chance of ending it early. So this was a fairly normal length for a Puerto Rico game. I might say that this was a 2-hour session, but that was due to it being late at night and the third night of the convention. But as you see, I have cut out 3/3 of the gameplay here. But 2 hours is definitely a very long session, so that is not normal either. I don't feel that any player made any huge mistakes. I do not agree with Christopher's decision not to go with any economy at all, but it could have worked. So I mean, he ended up in second place, so I should not dismiss it entirely. It's not my play style, really. But all in all, it was a very good session of Puerto Rico, and it could easily have gone another way if, for instance, Mons had decided to go with a factory. Maybe the game would have ended earlier, and then probably Klaus would have won it, because he would have gotten a better situation out of Mons' decision there. On the other hand, Mons would definitely have been contending for the win if he had gone with the with that building, with the factory. But he used the university to great effect, so it's hard to really say what would have happened. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and as I said, this was from Gothcon XXXVII, and next week will be a bit special. It will be I will not give you a game, I will give you an interview with the general of the convention. I can give you an insight into how the convention is made. And I will also give you a small update on my upcoming plans. And the week after that, I will go to another convention in Sweden called Lincoln. So that will be a gap there. But I will talk about that more in the upcoming episode. And until then, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.